will just get up a slide with some of those instructions to make that easier. I think many of us know now the ways to link to the Zoom interpretation, but please find the globe icon at the bottom of your screen, click on that, and then you will be able to choose the language that you wish to hear this conversation in. And that can be English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, or Arabic today. So we are here to talk a little bit more about our research. Where is the money for women, Black feminist movements? This research, when we started the Black Feminist Fund, it was really under the premise that Black feminist movements globally are direly under-resourced and mostly ignored by philanthropy. And we knew that, of course, because we ourselves are Black feminist activists or Black women in philanthropy. And we knew that from the community of folks that were around us. And as we began to kind of seed and build the fund, we realized that one of the important things for us to start with would be to get together researchers and experts who could gather the data and really show the state of the underfunding of Black feminist movements, and to examine not just the extent of that, but also the impact on Black feminist movements. We also wanted to celebrate Black feminist movements and our achievements. And so together, Awa, Cynthia, Maie, Sophia, and Timiabi brought together the report, which is Where is the Money for Black Feminist Movements, which you can find at fundblackfeminists.org. I hope many of you have already taken a look, downloaded. If you haven't, please do so. We would love your thoughts and your responses to the report and all that it says. And really, that was a year-long process of unearthing and of dialogue and of conversations with Black feminist movements around the world. So the purpose of today's conversation is to hone in on two specific chapters. They are a movement view and embarking on a quest. A movement view was created by the brilliant Awa, who is with us today. And in that, Awa takes a deep dive at how Black feminist movements are organized around the world, looking at what that organization looks like, how are we grouping ourselves, how are we mobilizing, but also takes a look at the impacts of the underfunding and what that looks like from a movement lens. We, in the chapter 1 of the research, which is a philanthropic lens, we had looked at the data from philanthropy itself. So looked at the ways in which, and this data already existed, we were just pooling it together to look at how Black women, girls, and trans folks were funded. And of course, we found terrible figures. 0.1 to 0.35% of foundation funding goes to Black women, girls, and trans folks around the world. But what Awa did was really look at it from the lens of movements ourselves and ask the questions of how are you funded? And so she will be sharing with us today some of that research. We're also going to take a deep dive on embarking on a quest. One of the pieces of data that we found was that only a single grant went to Black feminist organizations in the Middle East and North Africa regions. So we decided to take up the research to see what tapestry of movements existed for Black feminists in those regions. And so Maie, again, spent some time with Black feminist movements, interviewing, discussing, in conversation to really show the ways in which those movements are organized, are claiming space and creating the power to counter some of the oppressions that they face. So this is a 1-hour webinar. We are going to be spacious in the ways that we are speaking, because we do have interpretation in 5 languages. And so we are going to take pauses and speak slowly. That's not so easy for me, so I'm modeling it. And we ask that you please put your questions in the chat or the Q&A. We would love to create space for you to also engage with some of the authors of this work. For now, please feel free also to put your names, your pronouns, where you are, and why you've joined this conversation today in the chat. We'd love to know who's listening and where you're coming from. So I'm going to stop talking and turn to Maie and Awa. I'd love to even get you spotlighted. Is that possible? So that we can all see you. I'm going to turn to you and ask you my first question, which is, both of your chapters draw on the knowledges and the insights of Black feminists globally. And in the case of your research, Maie, particularly North Africa and the Middle East regions. So can you tell me a little bit about the process of that work? What was the methodology? Who did you speak with? How long did that take? I'm going to turn to you, Awa, to go first. Please jump in.
Merci beaucoup, Hakima. Merci à toute l'équipe. Cela a été une joie et un honneur de participer, n'est-ce pas, à cette recherche qui constitue, de mon point de vue, une innovation dans le monde féministe, dans les mouvements. Je remercie de m'avoir fait participer à cette aventure fantastique au sein d'une équipe féministe forte et très collaborative. Pour cette recherche, je suis parti d'une assertion que j'ai trouvée à partir de la commande de BFF, donc dans le site de BFF, Black Feminist Fund, qui dit que le Black Feminist Fund plaide pour un financement plus important et meilleur pour les mouvements féministes noirs dans le monde. Et de mon point de vue, cette assertion pose toute la problématique de la recherche et a orienté le travail que nous avons fait. Dans une première étape, nous avons procédé à une revue documentaire au sein de cette équipe féministe fantastique, n'est-ce pas, comme je l'ai dit. Et nous avons consulté les principales études réalisées par les fondations et par les mouvements eux-mêmes à propos du financement du mouvement des féministes noirs. Nous avons identifié quelles sont les questions relativement au financement qui ont été traitées, celles qui n'ont pas été traitées, et quelles sont les questions émergentes, les questions que le mouvement des féministes noirs se pose concernant le financement. Et aussi, nous avons pointé quels sont les différents points, n'est-ce pas, qui ont été débattus à partir des sources étudiées et qui sont en rapport avec notre problématique. Et les documents que nous avons consultés dans cette revue couvrent les 3 dernières années, et ce sont des publications faites par les fondations, faites par des organisations donc féministes. Et ce que nous avons déjà constaté au niveau de l'analyse documentaire, c'est que la race est un des éléments déterminants dans la difficulté d'accès pour les organisations de personnes de couleur. Nous avons vu également que le handicap, l'orientation sexuelle...
Main problem that most of the organizations that the issue of gender was a problem, and that most of the foundations worked in English, and therefore the French-speaking organizations were limited because they could not access English as a language. And there was an element that had to do with the geographical positioning of the different organizations, which had an influence on access that was at the level of the documentary review. But beyond the documentary review, we consulted a website, we looked at Facebook pages, we looked at blogs from different sources of information that organizations have put in place. And in that phase, and in the second phase that had to do with the methodology, we had conversations with several hundred leaders of feminist leaders, Black feminist leaders all over the continent. And specifically, we had discussions in Africa, in the Caribbean, in Central and Southern Northern America. We had conversations in the United States of America, but also conversations in Asia. And during these conversations, we spoke to feminists whose lives are impacted with the impact of historical events such as colonization, such as slavery, lives which lives which are lived in an environment that is marked by colonialism and other things. Now, continue with our methodology. We really wanted to talk about diversity. We wanted to look at the different characteristics that we came across when they're talking about linguistic diversity, the gender diversity of the different organizations, of the different leaders. When we talk about people non-conform, gender non-conform people, we talked about young people, about people who are older. We talked to leaders, to organizations that are vulnerable, leaders of organizations that bring together different feminists from different faith confessions and on and so forth. So that was the diversity of Black feminist movements. And in that way, as we brought together all of this information, we were able to come up with a report that Hakima talked about, and which needs to be, and that report that you really need to download because it has a lot of information. Thank you very much.
Merci, Awa.
Thank you very much, Awa.
I did it again. I said I wouldn't switch languages. I'm sorry. I would like to invite Maie to complement that. Tell me about the methodologies that you used and who you talked to.
Hello, everyone. Okay, I'm gonna remember to speak slowly. Regarding methodologies, there was many thoughts about how to go about this. And in this thought, there is also a process of combating our own misunderstanding or own assumption regarding Black feminist and Black communities in the MENA and within the MENA. What countries do we know about and what countries we don't know about? When I'm speaking about the MENA or Arabic speaking context, despite the fact that it's seen as one, but again, there is huge diversity regarding culture, language, and context. So it was a process of learning, even for us going through that. At the beginning, we thought of doing two parts, literature review of existing literature around Black feminist organizing in the MENA and Black communities, and reach out to groups and talk with them. We realized that the literature was very scarce, which is again saddening. And it was exciting because we're starting fresh. So we have a lot to learn. I talked to many groups, individuals, organizations, and we had to expand also our own understanding of what does organizing means. Are we reaching only to official groups or non-official groups? So we expanded. We talked to individuals, people who curate and run online platforms. And within the online platform, there's an expansion regarding what do we mean by it. So it could be an Instagram page, a Facebook, individual Twitter accounts, which were interesting, and also official and non-official groups. The interviews, what we were walking into was semi-structured interviews, and that it turned to, we promised each other that it's going to be an hour because, you know, it's always the time, but in a lot of cases, we ended up speaking for 2 to 3 hours. And I thank everyone who took part in that. it was a conversation of reflection and learning about what do we know and what do I know of each other and about each other before, showing that to the rest of the world. There was difficulties in reaching many countries at the time. Last year when we were doing the research, Sudan was going through an internet shutdown. Their voice and work and expertise is still missing. Yemen is a war zone again. So we had to maneuver a lot of contextual issues, starting from internet change to also thinking about erasure and locating groups. Who do we know? Who do we ask about groups? Who do people consider as an active part of the Black feminist movement in the MENA? Some of the responses back were like, we don't know any Black feminists in our context. Whether we don't know any Black feminists in our country. We never thought about that. And those were answers from active members and individuals and organizations within the MENA feminist movement. So it was very telling. We had to stalk people on Twitter and reach out. So it wasn't the easiest methodology. It was shifting and changing as we're going. And at the beginning, it was about interviewing and gaining a perspective, a narrative, but it also turned to a mapping while we were working. A mapping that we kept adding names and adding questions, and also within the designing of the question, it wasn't only about the work that we're doing, but about who we are and how do we understand ourselves as Black Arab or Black Arabic speaking Afro-descendant within different countries of the MENA, whether you are in Palestine, Egypt, Qatar, Iran. How do we understand our language, culture, and where do we locate ourselves within not only the local, regional, the local, regional, and the global Black feminist movement and Black feminist agenda. So the methodology was a fun learning process, and we can go in depth regarding this as we go on, but for now, this is it basically.
Thank you, Maie. And I think one of the things that you said that's so important, and I want to reiterate, is our gratitude to all the Black feminists who shared their knowledge with us in order to make this report possible, both ours chapter, your chapter, in fact, all of it. And despite the attempted erasure, I think you mentioned that in the Middle East and North Africa regions, but I believe that's also a global phenomenon. Despite that attempted erasure, Black feminists are everywhere, not only geographically, but also in terms of sites of struggle and where we're fighting from. So I want to go back to you, Awa, and take a bit of a deep dive. You conducted, as you said, this massive survey and literature review and conversations. What did you find? So
Ok. Alors, comme Maie l'a dit,
as Maie has just said, it was not easy to identify all of these, most of these people, and we tried to maximize the contacts that we had to use the different processes, and we managed nevertheless to contact a number of people. What we found, to my great surprise, was that the Black feminist movements are everywhere in the world. They are in multiple organizations, in associations, in groups, even amongst individuals who are self-confessed feminists and who work as activists. And we found that a lot of organized structures such as the NGOs were saying, no, we're not NGOs, and we're just a collective, or they call themselves associations, some call themselves networks, but the movement also consists of individuals. There are brokers, there are journalists, there are artists who organize festivals. Yeah, so that's what we found. Now, what this means is that Black feminist organizations are defined in different ways and have multiple statuses. Now, when you talk about the status of Black feminist organizations, there is something that I took note of, and that has to do with the legalization of the Black feminist organizations. Are they recognized by the government, or yes or not? And essentially, we can say that Black feminist movements do actually recognized. But why did they look for this recognition? And this is what is interesting, either because it is the government that demands that associations, or else the donors demand that associations be registered. Some donors say that if you're not registered, then I would not support you. But there are, so that has to do with all of the organizations that are recognized, but there are other organizations amongst the Black feminist organizations that are not legally recognized because that is expensive. It is expensive, and they do not have the resources to prepare the application for registration. Others are not recognized because they do not know what the processes are what processes they need to go through before they can become recognized. Others are not recognized because they say that the length of procedures is so complex. It takes so long that takes the time that they should actually be using to defend rights, feminist rights, and that they prefer not to get involved in those processes. Other organizations are not recognized because the police is aggressive towards them. Then there were some interesting cases, for example, in some countries where there are political tensions, or whether there are religious tensions. For example, in some feminist, Black feminist organizations actually prefer not to be legally recognized because they say you never know. We could be targeted, and if there is all kinds of repression, we could actually be targeted. But always within this refusal to seek recognition, and this is a rather recent example. There are with Black feminist organizations that say, no, I am not looking for legal recognition because it is not up to the government to tell me that I need to have a receipt or a certificate of registration. With or without this certificate of registration, I have the right to defend the issues that I'm working on, and the government has no say in what I do. Other organizations, they say, no, the funders cannot dictate what the organizations do, because when a donor or a feminist foundation says, I'm not going to give you money because you are not legally recognized, to say, keep your money because I can identify other funders who will give me their financing. So that means then that the issue of the status of organization, the issue of the legal recognition, there are several elements that one has to take into account. There is, on the one hand, the legalism that we see through what the organizations are going through. But then also there is the issue of security in case there is a repression, but also the legal recognition that is a form of resistance because donor organizations and sometimes organizations refuse also to depend on government. As an anarchist, I find it is wonderful. I find that is wonderful. Now, the final point that I wanted to talk about is that what the organizations are doing, Black feminist organizations and their leaders are doing. They are involved on many fronts, but not in a unilateral way, but really in an intersectional way. There is overlapping of all kinds of complex. Sorry?
Don't worry, our There was just a little glitch behind the scenes, but
So sorry.
keep going.
Oh,
OK. Donc,
so I was saying, I forgot what I was saying. So what one realizes is that one cannot say that there is an organization which takes a such and such a position. Organizations are aware that the oppression that they are confronted with and that has an impact on the lives of women is not oppression that comes either from capitalism, colonialism, or fundamentalism, religion, or patriarchy, but they are very much aware that all of the oppressions that women suffer from are really intersectional oppressions, so they're trying to undertake. They're doing wonderful work, and they're making progress as far as the agenda of women's rights is concerned, with people living with disabilities. We're talking about non-binary people who are non-binary or gender-based violence, right to health, the right to education, and in addition, the right to have the right to answer body. Thank you very much, Awa.
Move to you, Maie, also to hear what did you find in terms of the ways in which Black feminists are organizing and mobilizing in the Middle East and North Africa?
Sorry, I have a little bit of delay, so if you can repeat this, that would be great.
It's really same question to you.
Same question, okay.
What did you find?
I'm moving between channels, sorry. Okay, so what did we find? Of course, what we end up finding that there's more work that is not presented or highlighted within the region, and effort, whether it's individual, collective, different network on official capacity or unofficial capacity. We also found frustration. We also found a sense of belonging and learning from different generation of Black women across the globe, and understanding that we are part of a bigger movement, but a frustration with a continuous erasure of the work of the communities that we belong to, and a renewal, a process of rediscovering Black people in the MENA over and over again. It happened every couple of years. You know, there's Black people in Iraq, there's Black people in Iran, and that doesn't help with building a continuous knowledge about what is happening and not. There's different ways that the individuals and groups we talk with managed to organize, and we can capture it under the big umbrella of providing what they missed at one point or another. The lack of knowledge and the scarcity of knowledge that I addressed at the beginning is something that many groups, individuals, are committed to bringing forward themselves. And within the Arabic language, there's not many words yet to describe anti-Blackness, racism, and even the word Black is still within the, we cannot really use it. So we use different words because it's still used, not within the positive connotation. So the part of bringing the knowledge that the individual missed, walking and trying to understand their identity and their culture is an extreme and important part of the work that everyone is trying to do differently, not only through research, but personal narrative, reclaiming Black within Arabic, and this I cannot highlight how important it is, and building different platforms, not letting the lack of resources stopping us, because we do have social media and it was optimized big time, starting from platforms that uses Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, blogs that are all self-sustained and supported through the work and effort, time, labor of individuals and group behind it. Podcast, so I can highlight some of the groups. Black Pearl is one of the amazing platforms that is bilingual. It's actually available in Arabic and English if anyone wants to check it out. And it actually focuses on the producing knowledge about the experience of Black and Afro-descendant communities in the MENA, prioritizing also the voices of Black women in the MENA. It does this through different ways, talking about the history, personal narratives through writing, podcasts, panels, and also creating a huge network of care. This is one thing that was highlighted by many of the people who produce knowledge, that knowledge production is not just for education, but it's also creating networks of care. And the communities that you cannot reach out to, you hope that your words and your writing and your podcast can actually manage to break through the boundaries that we have, you know, that's shrinking civil society, the geographies, and even language sometimes. Also the voices of
Maie,
Black Tunisian
can
women.
I ask you
Yes.
for the interpreters?
Yes.
Slow down a little bit.
Slow down.
Give us
Yeah.
breath. Give us pauses.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to cover so many
No, it's
groups
exciting. I'm really excited.
Okay. Another thing that the knowledge producers talked about is their great gratitude, and they're seeing their work as a continuous of the knowledge that they received through time and space from different parts of the world. It is a continuation of knowledge that they read by Black feminists all across the world. Whether they got this knowledge through books, through organizing, and it's also showing a process of intergenerational, even though this knowledge was not produced to us, or we didn't have us in mind sometimes, but it did affect and shape the way that they understand their politics. And they're trying to continue, not produce, but continue this and make it available in our language to our community. One of the small efforts that can be seen as small, but one of the organizers, Samah Fadl, is using Twitter, her own personal Twitter, to archive the everyday life of Black Palestinian, just through tweets, through poetry, through showing pictures of her families and extended families. And then you look through her Twitter and manage to see the faces of Black Palestinian and this community. And for a lot of people out there, this information is new. You do have Black Palestinian? Yes, we do. And it can be as simple as that. Producing knowledge, sometimes we think of it in terms of quantitative and qualitative and this huge effort or writing, and we need to think about how we're writing it and editing it. It can be as simple as what we're putting out there to the world, even within our everyday interaction and our culture and our history and where we come from. It can be inviting, it can be beautiful, it can be many things. Also, the Black Iranian Collective optimizing different tools, artistic expression to engage with the history of the Black Iranian, not only within Iran, but also throughout the diaspora, because our community within the MENA is within our countries and it's also diasporic. Within the organizing and official spaces, I would like to bring forward also the work of the Mauritanian group, ONG Tagammo. I'm saying it in Arabic because there's no translation, but this work is also happening in a context where the group that is leading this work, combating different issues such as, you know, access to education, FGM, child marriage, and poverty, in the same context where there's an active movement to abolish slavery. And I'm going to slow down after saying this. It is an active movement currently in 2022 to abolish slavery of Black people in Mauritania. And it is how do we even understand this? I can't believe I'm saying abolish slavery in the time that we are in, where we're told that this is a historical event, you know, something that we're way behind. And Elena group also doing that in Lebanon. They are a group of domestic workers who are taking their own narrative, doing a great work of supporting other groups and individuals under the kafala system. The kafala system, for the people who don't know, is a form of a sponsorship in order for you to work in many countries in the MENA. And it is referred to as a modern slavery. There's nothing modern about the slavery. It is a system of exploitation, entrapment, and many lives were lost within the system and continue to happen. But also what makes the work of NNN amazing, that they understand that their work is not only about ending the or bettering the situation of kafala in the countries they're in, but also addressing the situation of that drove them out of their countries seeking work and labor, intersecting the work with bigger dreams of connecting what's happening in the MENA and some countries in the MENA and what's happening in Africa. And this is something, some African country, and this is something that absolutely amazing. Also, the intersection of race and ethnicity can be found within a group Ganawaya Hurra. It's free, yeah. I'm trying to translate it, but I'm losing my Arabic and English, so let's not do this. Ganawaya Hurra is a group in Egypt that work from the south, and their work intersect with, they work mainly on sexual reproductive health and rights, and their work intersect with also working for their right for land as an indigenous Nubian woman. The many work that I can talk for an hour about this, so someone needs to stop me at one point or another.
Okay, I'm gonna.
No, however, what I needed to add, that in the way that we wrote it in the research, we made a distinction between production of knowledge and grassroots organizing. However, there's no distinction. This work is completely tied together, and it's completing each other work. And we just made those distinctions to make the highlight clear, but we should not think of also their work. They're doing great intersection work with minimum resource, and I cannot emphasize minimum resource strong enough.
And that is a beautiful segue to my next question. But one of the things that you both, I think, have really beautifully highlighted in the work that you produced, and we must be doing a good job on this panel, because in the chat, I'm seeing lots of people say, where can I read more? And that's the point of this conversation. Please do download both of these chapters and the full report at fundblackfeminists.org. The chapters will also be available in French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Arabic later next month. But one of the things I'm hearing from both of you is that Black feminists use multiple tactics. We're organized in many diverse formations, and that we might be operating or working closely in proximity with the communities that we serve, but we're deeply global in terms of how we see each other, what we're trying to connect with. Maie, you use the language of renewal in the sense of the ways in which others kind of, what's the word? We come to their attention suddenly. Every once in a while, Black feminists become sexy. And I think that's true for other folks in movements, but also for funders. But there's a continuity of Black feminists organizing across time and across generations, and many ways the renewal of Black feminists across generations. And so Awa also pointed deeply to that in her work. The last point I think I want to highlight, which Awa, when you were talking about the registration, one of the things that you mentioned in the report is also that criminalized communities of Black feminists. So in some contexts, LGBTIQ feminists, sex workers, Black feminists using drugs, other criminalized communities, even though to some extent we're criminalized for our Black identities, but that's another topic. Those also have obviously a different relationship to the question of registration. And you mentioned that Black feminists are deeply and almost by nature intersectional in terms of the work. And yet funding is often narrowly focused on issues. So I want to move us to that funding question. And we've got only a few minutes to go into it, but Awa, you kind of revealed some of the ways in which Black feminists are impacted by funding, despite the celebration, the achievements, all of the amazing things that we're doing. Can you say more about that relationship?
Oui, effectivement. Quand on parle de la faiblesse du financement des organisations.
Yes, when you talk about the very low level of financing of Black feminist organizations, I think, first of all, about LGBTQI organizations that deal with their identities, organizations of transgender persons, of lesbians, which organizations are the most marginalized. But as you see in your conclusion, some of these organizations are recognized perhaps because the government at that time did not know exactly what the letters meant, LGBTQ, and maybe in earlier years there was perhaps a greater flexibility, there was greater tolerance as concerns individuals who are non-binary or people who have a subversive sexuality. But we realize that if we talk today about problems that are linked to financing, that has to do, as far as Black feminist organizations are concerned, that we realize that there is a kind of hierarchy. Let me try to describe that hierarchy to you. Now, there is the fact that that feminist organizations, all feminist organizations, all kinds of feminist organizations. Now, those organizations get less financing than pro-life organizations against women's rights, against gender, which are actually the fundamentalist and the patriarchal organizations. So those organizations that get 3 times more financing than women's rights organizations, looking at all of them together combined. So now, if we then look at what happens to feminist organizations, amongst those feminist organizations, Black feminist organizations receive less financing than the other feminist organizations. And within the Black feminist organizations, feminist organizations in the rural areas, organizations of transgender organizations, lesbian feminist organizations, actually the or feminists living with disabilities actually get even less financing than just cisgender feminist organizations. So that is the situation. What that then means is that not only is there a hierarchy, there is a discrimination between and the anti-gender organizations and women's rights, but within the women's organizations, there is a disparity that is linked to race, that is linked to one's sexuality, that is linked to gender, to whether or not one lives with disability, linked even to language, because we actually begin to realize that French-speaking organizations actually receive even less organizations than English-speaking organizations, because most of the donors, of course, speak English. And so you have to understand the ins and outs of a language. It's not always easy. And so we understand that in spite of the essential contribution of Black feminists to social progress and change, their movements are really underfinanced. The Black feminist organizations do not live, they survive. They try to survive. And in that trying to survive, they do find ways of linking, of pooling their resources. They find a way of working in solidarity, they find a way of identifying non-monetary resources. And to come back to the issues of the difficulties in identifying financing, a lot of feminist organizations that get financing, and there are very few people that cover over 3 years. Most of them get financing over 2 years, or perhaps even over 1 year. And even when you have a financing over a period of 2 years, you're actually given the first tranche, you use it, you present the report, but in the meantime, when you're drafting your report and you're submitting your report, or where the report is being looked at, either you get the second tranche, but you find that there are losses concerning the initial activities. So that is a problem. Another problem is that generally speaking, the foundations finance activities, but there are people who spend time implementing those activities, who use their energy, who use electricity, who use transport, who use space or offices, and not just offices, but all of these costs. They don't say no, we're not going to give you institutional support. Yes, I think we need to stop joking. Yes. So
of the time, because we have only 10 minutes left. We do have some really interesting questions coming from the audience. So I want to just wrap this
Oui,
up
je voudrais
real
seulement
quick.
lancer.
Please allow me to just say one of the things that the organizations have said. What they said is that the funders should give institutional financing, core funding, and allow organizations to use the financing for the needs of the community, to think about the future that they want to live and invest in that future, and invest sustainably in those organizations that are already working to concretize that future. That is a message addressed to the funders. Thank you very much.
Directly from Black feminist movements, and it's the call to action. If you want to read more about some of the statistics that AWA found through the survey of the dire underfunding of Black feminist groups, please go to the research. I've tried to paste some of the data in the chat, but also as AWA's reading from the report, there are also direct quotes from Black feminist movements about that underfunding and their call and messages to funders. I have several questions in the chat, which I'm gonna just go to. One of them is, what would be each of your call to action for the diverse participants in this webinar? That's a hard one. And the other is there a website that people can go to find more information on the groups Maie spoke to? So maybe the second question, do you want to take that real quick? I imagine, and then we could, you could perhaps also answer your call to action, and then I'll go to you.
Okay. Yes, all the groups are referenced who's in the research. So please read it and follow them. Many of the work is bilingual, and do not let the Arabic stop you. There is a translation in most of the platforms. Send love, support the work, and share it with other collectives and groups, because I'm pretty sure we all appreciate this kind of support. And if there's more, let's see where we can also put new emerging groups and collectives. But everyone mentioned, and the people I forgot to mention, are actually within the paper and chapter, including the Twitter spaces. Okay, my camera keeps turning on and off. Okay, the call for action. I want the call of action not to be coming from only the frustration and the difficulties and obstacles in life, but the call for action is the contexts that we're dealing with, the current situation, the historical, is not easy. So let's not design support that limit us and suffocate us and burn us out trying to combat different oppressions. to ask many groups in many contexts and many countries where they're dealing with militarism to register with the same government is just silly. And it puts their life at risk. It also does not take in question the non-citizen ability to not organize within the country. It does not take the intersection of immigration and citizenship. It limits the group from moving freely, and it asks them to completely put their life on the line in order their details, their security, in order to negotiate being registered in order to receive funds. And we need to really think about this. What does the registration do? Who does it serve? Who does it not serve? Asking many groups to have intersectional agenda when we're not providing flexible and intersectional funding also is interesting. The call for action is not about making sure that the group survive right now or survive as long as, but expand and be able to move freely, be able to shape the agenda, and survival cannot be the thing that we're aspiring to be honest. It is just the bare minimum at this point. There's so many vision beyond survival. And how can we achieve this with the many restriction that is happening? So part of survival is also recognize every effort, whether individual, whether organizational, whether network, as labor that people take time and every bit of hope in order to accomplish it, whether they're getting resources or not. Not having resources or lack of resources did not stop many groups of starting, did not stop someone from creating a blog, a Twitter account, doing full-time job and logging in post 9 p.m. and start working on, mobilizing and advertising and collecting. Lack of resources did not stop people from creating networks of care and support, of even trying to get their own resources from the community and impoverished community. Lack of resources did not stop us, but it can help for this work to flourish, to look beyond surviving. And it also should acknowledge the labor going into this and think of activists as worker, because it need to be acknowledged at this point or one point or another. It will help if the intersection of labor is very clear regarding what you're asking people to do. It's not self-sacrifice. Another thing, thinking of knowledge and the ways that we understand knowledge as this process that doesn't take resources and time, prioritizing what knowledge is needed and what knowledge is not needed. Personal narrative and knowledge made by community is not as supported. The distinction between what is grassroots organizing and what is humanitarian support and all of those categories that you need to fit your work into. And sometimes you need to adopt yourself to the work and to the agenda. The burnout that happens in tons of reports and tons of communication to just try to explain that you want to make a difference and you're going to try to do it with or without the support. So with the support, it's going to be better.
Thank
you.
That makes sense. Thank you for that call to action, Maie. I'm also seeing a new question in the Q&A, which maybe is to you also, Awa, and maybe you can bring this into the call to action. But despite all the data shared in the report, we still hear that Black and LGBTQI+ movements are trendy and they keep receiving all the funds. I'm wondering about the source of this misconception. Is it social, systemic, institutional? I know there's not really an answer for this, but I think it's relevant to initiate the debate. Awa, can you speak to that and also speak to your call to action? All in 2 minutes.
La première partie a fait un bop, je n'ai pas bien entendu la question. Donc, je vais passer directement à l'appel à l'action.
I didn't quite understand the second question. Hakima, the one in the question and answer. Can you? Okay. So I'm going to go on to the call to action. First of all, I'm going to address to funders, give, and have confidence give and have confidence, be flexible, and be generous. If you want us to change the world, we have the capacity, we have the commitment, we have the capacity to do that. Now, addressing Black feminist organizations, I like to say to them that we have the power. We have the power. If the funders exist, it's because we existed. If we did not exist, the funders would not exist. They would have fewer resources, and therefore in our interaction with the funders, let us not position ourselves in terms of those who are asking for. We are demanding, because the money that is mobilized, that money is mobilized on our behalf, and we need to demand it. That is the first thing I'd like to say. The second thing I'd like to say as I conclude is that Black feminist organizations should work in a more collaborative way, more intersectional, without obstacles, without ostracism. Whether talking about rural or urban organizations, as is gender or transgender, let us work hand in hand. Let us work together, because that is what is going to be part of our strength, and that is what is going to help us to make our weight felt by the donors. That is the call to action that I'd like to make.
And asked me to join. I'm going to bring this as my wrap up. So at the Black Feminist Fund, we talk about funding Black feminists like we want them to win. And that tag is really about moving, as you all talked about, from Black feminist organizing being a survival to being able to thrive. And we're doing that. Somebody asked, how do we do that? What does it look like to fund flexibly? We don't have it perfect, but some of the ways that we're trying to do that is by giving 8-year core funding, giving grant sizes that are impactful, funding registered and non-registered group, and not constraining our grants to particular themes or issues, given the intersectionality of Black feminist movements that we talked about. We all, of course, always want all of your feedback on how we can do even better, but that's some of the advice and call to action for funders. So we are right at the hour. Thank you so much, Awa and Maie. Thank you to all of our interpreters for allowing us to be able to speak together in 5 languages. And we apologize when we went fast. Thank you everyone who joined us and listened attentively to the conversation and contributed in the chat. Again, we appreciate all the knowledge that you bring. Please do go to the website, fundblackfeminist.org, and look out on our social media channels for when the translation of the report is up and ready. It's been fun and exciting to have this conversation. Thank you all so very much. Thank you, Naima. Do you want to close the call for us?
Happy to. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.